Get the whole story.
Welcome back. You're watching Front Row, still on our discussion on mental health in children. Violina Gitao, Mental Health and Psychosocial Coordinator, Save the Children. She's here with me in studio. And we equally have Dr. Judy Kamau, who is a child consultant psychiatrist, and she's equally a member of the Mental Health Task Force. Now, before we went for that break, Violina, you mentioned something to do with family issues. And I just want to get some statistics before we talk to Dr. Kamau. An estimated 13% of adolescents aged 10 to 19 is estimated to live with diagnosed mental disorder. Even before, we had the statistic that 45,000 of adolescents die each year because of suicide. Dr. Kamau, coming to you, grim statistics here we're seeing. I mean, suicide at the age of just being a teenager. What goes through their head?
I will always point out suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideations. That's a symptom of a mental health problem. Yeah. So by the time it reaches to that point where someone actually takes their own life, yes, we have a few who have impulsive acts, but for many, especially if it's related to something like depression, it's usually a symptom. So for this person has reached a point where they feel it will never get better. They feel like nothing else matters. And they're feeling like they've really been struggling, or they're very either in their overwhelmed space or for anything. So I always say suicidal thoughts, that's a symptom. It's not quite a diagnosis. So we have to find out what else was happening to be able to help this person. So before you reach to that space, then someone has to see whether they can identify other symptoms that point to a particular diagnosis. So you can have suicidal thoughts happening in illnesses such as depression in itself, even anxiety or very severe panic attacks. Sometimes someone would feel extremely overwhelmed and they feel like these panic attacks will never go and there's no end in sight. Sometimes you have very severe mental health problems. My colleague mentioned schizophrenia, which is a thought disturbance where either you can hear voices or things like that, or even mood disorders, bipolar. So suicidal ideations and attempts, those are symptoms that all is not well. So before we reach there, then for children and adolescents, a caregiver or themselves have to be vigilant about themselves. So if you're going to talk about something like depression, you feel a lot of extremes of sadness, which are not quite explainable, or a parent will notice perhaps the child is starting to withdraw from others. Their self-esteem goes very, very low, where they feel they're not worth what others are. They view themselves very negatively. Yeah, so that in itself is something that would point to, if it goes more extreme, points towards hopelessness and worthlessness. When they start feeling extremes of hopelessness is when they start feeling, then what's the point? Or feeling worthlessness. That's where you have very low self-esteem. Can be triggered by anything in the adolescent age, actually, or many things. One of the things I always point out is a young person's look at options is very narrow. So if their problem-solving skills are not as broad as an adult, so if someone is jilted by a boyfriend, for example, it's very easy for them to think the world is over, what will my friend think? And remember, for that age group, the opinion of your friends matters more than the opinion of their parents. Yeah? So most of them will view themselves in light of others. And most of the time, actually, the worthlessness they feel, it's more perceived. It's not even sometimes actual. It's how they feel others are seeing them. Yeah? So others now have other symptoms to look out for. She's mentioned already maybe isolation or irritability, or when someone starts talking about hurting themselves, or that they're having thoughts about hurting themselves. So such talk already is a red flag. So getting suicidal thoughts is a symptom that all is not well. So we now start looking for other things. But we don't have to wait until it gets to that space of suicidal thoughts. So as a parent, if you find maybe there's change even in behavior, in mood, in isolation of your child, their eating habits are different, where they're eating too much or too little. They have poor concentration in school, their school performance is suffering. Sleep is a problem. They may have severe headaches, and maybe they're even reporting that they're sleeping well. You can start having that conversation with them. And one of the ways, when you were talking earlier, you mentioned about time and people being very busy. What I will say is that even if you have how many shifts of a job, you should not be too busy for your child.
Okay, all right. Yes, please finish your point.
Oh, yeah, you shouldn't be too busy for a child to be able to notice something or have or initiate conversation. So that should always be there. Even if it's a weekend that you're having to talk to them, make yourself available and start looking. So you will not pick signs and symptoms if you're not available to see them. So you have to be there to see them.
Okay. Now, you see, every symptom that she's mentioned, these are things that normal adolescents go through. Headache, today I might be moody, tomorrow I am not. I may feel like eating today, tomorrow I'm not. What parents are asking then is, how do I know for sure? You know what? This is not just them being a teenager. This is something serious. Because most of the times, the symptoms are sort of the same as how a teenager or an adolescent would behave. Because all those things that she has mentioned, I'm sure at some point in my life, I did them. And I am fine. So then how else is a parent supposed to know that, well, there's a problem here?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just to take us a bit back.
Yeah.
The first 1,000 years of a child when he's born, they're very critical for their development and life onwards. Now coming to adolescent, it's a transition from adulthood, from childhood to adulthood, which is very critical. So any interference or too much stress or not transiting to this stage safely can cause some of those mental disorder. So coming back to your question, yes, as a teenager, you may display certain symptoms which they may seem normal at that point, because today you're moody, the next day you're okay. But then when there's that persistence, for instance, for depression, when it goes for over 2 weeks, you're seeing this child is too withdrawn, they're not eating well, or even their sleeping pattern has changed. Then maybe in terms of academics, their performance has really maybe go down. There are those changes that you may see that are persistent. Then there's a red flag. So as a caregiver, just now coming closer to your child, just trying to win them over and just getting to know, is there any changes? Is there anything that has happened? Just bring them closer. They'll be able to open up. And sometimes you can even just maybe try to maybe pinpoint whatever you've observed. Like even just mention, I noticed the other day you didn't eat well. Yesterday you didn't eat well. Today, what's up? Did you like the food? Or just trigger or prompt them to give you a conversation, or just engage them in a conversation. Then from there you can be able to pick up. And then, as I mentioned earlier, also taking time even to go to their school, engage with their teachers. As much as maybe these days we have so many learners in a classroom, a teacher may not be able to pick a few points, but there's that certain change of behavior. Even a teacher can still pick, this child was active, this child was interacting with their mates, but all of a sudden they are maybe even aggressive with others. They lock themselves in the room when they come. They don't want to interact with others. So there are those things that even the outside world can tell you. We also have house helps, maybe who sometimes support us, or even other family members we live with. You can still also be able to pick, is so-and-so behaving like this the same way I'm seeing, or you guys have not noticed anything, you just try to probe further. With that, it can really help you understand and be able to now know there's something that is going on. Maybe it's not that mental condition at the moment, but maybe there's something that is triggering. And then also, even us as parents or even caregivers, we may be the cause of this mental condition. For instance, if it's a child who is being brought up in maybe a dysfunctional family where there's violence, this can also contribute so much. And even with COVID, so many children were exposed to so many violence, some of them coming from their primary caregivers. Yeah. So the environment also does contribute to how this child will transit safely to adulthood, as much as there is the normal mood swing and the normal symptoms for adulthood. Then being there as a key or best role model for your child can really help them to transit safely. But more so creating that friendship with a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You've talked about a couple of things that I'm interested in picking Dr. Kamau's mind over. So Dr. Kamau, here's a case scenario. She's mentioned that issues such as, family problems could trigger such mental health challenges in children, young and old, both. So here's a case scenario. Right now, children are on long holidays, for a month or so. You're seeing, number one, your parents are fighting, or there are issues such as money problem, financial issues in the house. You have failed. These are the same parents that are giving you stress as a child. How do you get comfortable enough to open up to the same people who are actually at the fault of what's happening to you?
Okay. Well, that's a tricky one, yes, especially if more or less there's violence in the home, not just even the arguments that they may be there, because that creates an environment of fear. Someone is not approachable, or they're always in a bad mood. What I would say is you can talk to them, especially if there are two parents fighting, you can talk to the one who's more approachable. Or sometimes you can even reach out to maybe someone who is also very close to the parents. Yeah. We do also have, in various places, counselors who are available. But if a child or an adolescent can at first talk to one of the parents who is more approachable, most of the time I find the issue sometimes escalates a little bit further, and maybe they get help for the child or themselves, or they tone whatever else, or they get help for whatever else is bothering them. Reaching out to a close aunt or a close relative. We've had some also talk to school counselors who also help out with that. Unfortunately, also now that schools have closed, that might not be available. So we getting in touch even with our close family members or aunties, and sometimes now we have hotlines, but then of course not everyone will be able to reach out to various contact centers that are available. But where possible, I know there's an organization that was also working with Save the Children that would work as a liaison and do offer some counseling on phone. So there is help that can be offered, but it becomes quite a bit of a challenge, especially where it's in the home. So I do acknowledge that's a challenge, but you can reach out to a relative, or you can call the various hotlines that we do have, or reach out to counselors that are available. Or sometimes even hospitals do offer, or nurses, but getting one of the parents involved is usually best. Yeah.
All right, so what exactly is the mental health task force doing to solve some of these challenges? Because we're seeing there are gaps when it comes to solving this issue.
Okay, so in terms of maybe one of the things is that more or less advocacy, rolling it out into primary healthcare, being able to pick up symptoms even earlier. Sometimes most of the referrals we even get are from a general pediatrician, a general practitioner, or a pediatrician who the child feels she can talk to, or who can pick up the various signs and symptoms that they have. and then they're able to refer appropriately. So getting up the human resource, improving the mental health literacy, both of the public and also of general practitioners and even other cadres in the medical profession, has really boosted up in terms of referrals and people knowing what to do. The nurses can pick up and things like that. Currently, we're also working with even police and trying to empower them more in picking up or even conflict resolution when it comes to such matters. And that, I think, will build up quite a bit in where we want to be. So being able to pick it up on time, being able to recognize that it's a problem, being able to refer appropriately and as soon as possible, the more better outcomes that we'll have.
All right, so we have been talking about, a safe environment. At this day and age, what is the ideal safe environment for children to thrive?
Okay. Before maybe I mention or I discuss further on that, maybe I can also emphasize on where maybe children can report and maybe what as Save the Children we've been doing. We've been working very closely with Childline Kenya, where there's a number that is free, it's 116, where any child can call in, especially for children who are not maybe comfortable to disclose whatever they're going through, regardless if it's child abuses or any mental issues. They can freely call that number. At the same time, even Save the Children, we also have our own child safeguarding number, which is also toll-free, which is 0800 720 216. At any time, any child can call and be assisted and maybe even linked to the nearest counselor within where they can get support. But mostly there's that online counseling where they can be supported. So it's important just to seek help. Now talking about the safe environment, it doesn't mean to be, or it doesn't have to be an expensive or a lavish kind of status. You can still live within your status, but be able to create that conducive environment for your child, where first of all, as a caregiver or as a parent, you're approachable. You have that friendliness with your child, and they can freely come to you at any given time. Even when they're at fault and maybe they've done something wrong, they can still approach you, and you can be able maybe to reprimand them with love and caution them and direct them. Another way is also just by creating that conducive environment, taking time with them, like Dr. had mentioned, as much as you're busy, making time for them. If it's even a 2-year-old or the below 5, play with them, watch the cartoons that they like to do. Through that, you may be able to pick issues that they are going through, or even anything that they want to share and open up, and you can be able to pick, this is going on with this child, this happened to this child. For the teenagers also, just even taking time out with them, hanging out with them, creating that conducive environment where they can freely share their opinion. Also, for instance, even when you're having challenges, for instance, with the COVID pandemic, there are so many parents who are affected, and some of them lost their source of livelihood. Coming down and sitting down with your child and just trying to explain to them in a language that they can understand, it will really help ease this pressure or even stress and tension between parents and caregiver. Unlike a parent who maybe you keep it to yourself and then now you're projecting to your child. Maybe they're coming just to ask for something, and there you are bursting out to them. This will make this child not to come closer to you and be able even to share.
What happens majority of the
happens, time. But it's high time that parents tries to just create that environment. Apart from that, even as Save the Children, for instance, we've been doing advocacy on that, and also trainings even to teachers and parents on something we call positive parenting, where the parents are psychoeducated on positive way or safe ways of maybe disciplining their children, or just create that rapport and create a conducive environment where they can relate freely with their children. The children can come to them whenever they have issues. And also having that free environment where even that child can freely express themselves, listening to their opinion. It's always important. They have a lot to say, and when you give them that chance and audience, they have so much to share. So it's just a matter of bringing them on board and listening to them as often as possible.
All right, Dr. Kamau, it seems like parents have a big role to play when it comes to mental health issues, especially in children. Question is, are parents willing to get or take this advice? After all, you've had so many people say, my child is my child. I'll handle them the way I want.
It's true. Actually, the role, I always say, of the parent's role to provide that environment that she's just talked about, the environment where your child can grow up, develop their full potential. It's the role of the parent. So by ignoring problems that are even being picked by the teachers and even being sent for referrals where you can notice that this child is really struggling, by ignoring that, then they're not really fulfilling that role. Yeah. So I will say, for many parents will, of course, always want the best for their child. And creating an environment or facilitating an environment or a space where the child feels heard, the child can express themselves, ask questions, and still feel safe, then that's the ideal. Then they'll be able to come to you. So I know we've come from various backgrounds, and that's usually the argument, even nowadays, that these were not problems during my time. But then also during your time, you couldn't engage even your teachers. You had no social media. You didn't know a lot about what else was happening. And times are different. And sometimes even during your time, maybe your parent was even more available for you. As much as you may not have interacted with them the way your child wants you to interact, but they were available in their own little ways. So I would say, as much as possible, be available. Ask for help where you're not sure or where you don't know what to do. Consult. But carrying on the attitude of feeling like my child doesn't have a problem, as much as many people have picked it up, then it's at the loss of your child. You're not really helping out this child fulfill their potential. And that's what I would wish every parent would want, or really want to have. So yes, there's some things people will say, I will handle it, or this child doesn't listen. But if your way is not really working, then maybe it's time to admit that it's not working.
All right. I think that's a really good place to end this conversation. Thank you very much, ladies, for making time to join us here on Front Row. With me in studio is Vielina Gitau. She is a mental health and psychosocial coordinator at Save the Children. And we equally had Dr. Judy Kamau, who is a child consultant, psychiatrist, and a member of the mental health task force. She was joining us via Zoom. Thank you very much. And of course, the conversation continues. If you see or you know a child going through something, of course, you can always help. Be free to help or alert the people who can actually help that child. Well, thank you very much for watching. I'm Ashley Mazuri. Till next time.